Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our video by Astrology Victoria. We are going to be talking about the month ahead of October. And my name is Dulcie Cardinal. I'm joined by my co-host, Tatiana Hassan. How are you?
Good. My name's Tatiana and Neptune. And we have also our guest, Spencer Michaud.
Hi,
Nice to be here.
Spencer.
How you doing? Nice to see you all again. Happy to be
Thanks.
here.
Thanks for joining us. Spencer is an astrologer in Ypsilanti. Is that how we say it?
That's right, Ypsilanti, Michigan.
Michigan. So we met at Glock, the astrology conference there. And actually we met online through Chitra Babadas's course and became friends since there. So thank you so much for joining us. I know you've just been through some issues with losing power and being displaced and all of that. How are you doing now?
I got Venus Uranus opposition on my midheaven and IC axis.
Oh,
So I was completely, power went out for over 24 hours and had to do a bunch of stuff in foreign environments and whatnot. So it's been a little while. I'm kind of recovering today, but it's good. The power came back on, and it's helping me to have gratitude for something that I think it's easy to take for granted.
Definitely. Yeah, you definitely take it for granted until you do not have it. And then everything seems horrible from there.
Indeed.
So Spencer, you are doing some webinars, one per month, and I participated in your first one, talking about the Decans of Virgo, and you have a Decans of Libra course coming up, as well as a Decans of Fall bundle together that people can purchase. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you. That's something that we're going to be doing on October the 9th, which is a Saturday. And I doing this kind of deep dive into the 10-degree sections of each sign, which historically have a number of both mythological stories and visual symbolism associated with them. So we're going on a deep dive of the mythology, of the archetypes, of the spirits that inhabit these decans, as well as the tarot images that they've been syncretized to. So this is something that I've been using in my readings, my transit reports, just to bring a lot of depth to the sign and a lot of details. So you can sign up on my website, spencermichaud.com. We have a coupon code for you for Astrology Victoria, AstroVic20, if you want 20% off of the Decans of Libra. And you can also buy it in a bundle for Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, the Decans of Fall, if you want to sign up for all three. So looking forward to seeing all of you there. And I think we had a really nice time the last time with Virgo and all those stories.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I ended up taking a ton of notes, which was incredibly helpful for kind of consolidating all of that information. But it's also recorded, and you send the link of the recording later. So if people can't make it live, or if they want to kind of examine those the information that you share, it's incredibly helpful for that. So yeah, I highly recommend, and definitely use that code if you want 20% off of the price. All right. Well, thanks so much, Spencer. And so we're gonna get into the month of October, and I'll just go to the PowerPoint here. And there we go. Okay, can we all see it?
yes, yes.
Great. Okay, well, welcome to Libra season, the month of October. And we're just going to start with the 1st of October. So there's a lot going on right at the beginning of October, and I added a few aspects that were not exact, but they were still kind of carrying over from the month before. And right before we went on, Spencer reminded us that Mercury is going under the beams, so that will be a significant period of time right at the beginning of October. So just as we start, are there any, maybe Spencer, is there anything that you want to point out right from the beginning here?
Yeah, I think we're going to be starting the month with Mercury kind of having a spotlight here, especially because it's going to be making that square to Pluto. We're, of course, under that retrograde Mercury kind of phase. And when Mercury goes under the beams, that's called a condition of phasis, which it roughly means an omen that is speaking very loudly. So Mercury in this phase is sort of becoming invisible. Literally, you can't see the star of Mercury after it goes within 15 degrees of the sun in the sky. So they thought of this as Mercury's journey into the underworld as a psychopomp, being able to lead the souls of the dead to the underworld for judgment or for whatever it is. So, this is something where a lot of our communications might start going behind the scenes, where we're starting to begin to understand what type of negotiations we might have to engage in moving forward, which I think is a big theme for this month, is contractual negotiations.
Yeah, definitely. Tatiana, did you want to add anything about the Mercury-Pluto square?
Oh, absolutely. So when we have this powerful square, there might be all these themes of like the shadow, shadow work, inner deep psychological shadow work that is coming through to be expressed eventually, right? When Mercury goes back direct, this is the time where we're kind of looking inward and all of trying to dig deep. So it's interesting because I participated this group collective, and we're having these discussions, heart circles and things like that are coming up every month, and we've already had one, and that's like a precursor almost to that kind of work where everybody sits around and expresses, tells the truth, because it's also truth telling, right? But because it's kind of behind the scenes, right, it's like we don't know, we're accessing those hidden parts. And with Pluto, Pluto wants to transform and just literally get the shit, pardon my French, out at some point. And with Mercury there could be real raw talk or raw thought. So this is an excellent time also to reevaluate how we've been relating to others, also because we have this big Libra, it's a lot of this Libra energy about balancing, negotiating, like Spencer said, and how are we going to speak our truth, from a deep raw place, and what we can uncover. And then when the truth is exposed, then things can move forward. Usually when you're like in the dark of things, you just don't know. But when truth comes out and we're really honest, and this is raw energy, this is raw, honest energy, and it could be messy, messy, so expect maybe some mess there too, right?
Yeah, it's like a plunger, isn't it?
It is a plunger.
Pluto is the plunger.
And you're
right. So just having some really deep, meaningful conversations, like you were saying, to be able to expose. Sometimes it exposes corruption. I think that's something I see with Pluto as well. Is whenever we have context with it, things that have been festering beneath the surface become exposed. Pluto was that deity, Hades, that erupted from the underworld like unexpectedly and like kidnapped the maiden Persephone down to the underworld. So there may be something that erupts in our lives that we have to kind of deal with. And I think that one thing to piggyback off what you're saying, Tatiana, is when we come face to face with these things, we get to we can choose our reaction to it, right? We may not always get to choose the event that happens, but we get to choose whether how gracefully we deal with that. And that decan of Mercury, just to talk about, to begin to talk about those decans, is all about making tiny adjustments. The third decan of Libra is how can you, spin one plate slightly faster or slow one down to keep everything in motion, to stay centered.
And it's also interesting to see that Venus right now is in Scorpio, right? And
Right.
Venus is the ruler of Libra. So there is a relationship there in the energy as well of relationships and how we relate to others. Or this heavy Libra energy here of that grace. While Venus is ruler, it's in its detriment, right? And also going down to that underworld as well. Not going down because she's not, but like being tainted with the Scorpio energy as well, which is the energy of that shadow and looking into the shadow of our relationships. How do we relate to each other? So that's going to be really prominent with Venus there. And also we'll see that Mars, it's in the opposite. It's also in its detriment in Libra. So we have Venus in Scorpio in Mars's sign, ruled sign, and Mars in Libra. So this is almost like having to have that grace when things get nasty. We're going to have to find grace in the nastiness, basically. And this is how it feels. It's like yeah, Venus in the house of horrors. Was it you that mentioned that the other day? I don't remember, like Venus going into this like house of horrors kind of, and Mars being put in this, I don't know who it was, and maybe it was a tutor who mentioned that in a video. It's like having Tarzan in a London, drinking tea and eating with a little spoon. And so we have these contrary energies here, and this is really what we need to be able to negotiate. So this is a great time for like taking on nonviolent communication, things like that, because we're gonna probably see violence emerging as we progress. We might see actual violence, especially when Mars squares Pluto. We might see more of the actual violence coming up. So this is a great time to really start thinking about how we're going to communicate our deeper truths without hurting another human being and being as graceful.
And Tatiana, I wanted to add to that. One of the things that maybe people assume that isn't necessarily correct is that a Libran energy is automatically balanced. Like the beginning of the Libra Decanic series actually highlights injustices and imbalances. So we have to become awareness of where things are unfair first before we can make the proper action of making adjustments to the other, right? So this is the time where we have to really not just create a win-lose situation. We have to create a win-win situation by giving something up and not having all the 100% agency about getting everything that we want. It's all about give and take.
Right. The aim of Libra is that harmony and balance, but there's a long, long path to get there.
Right.
And it does involve compromise, and not necessarily compromise where everybody is happy with the final outcome,
Right,
but
exactly.
compromise where at least there is some equilibrium and justice.
Because
yeah.
I wanted to mention also, because Venus being in that position, also trining Mercury at the same time, that's going to almost, I think, bring that grace into the mix, like beaming from Mercury, from
Venus
that
trining
Mercury. I'm sorry, Mercury.
Neptune.
Blah, 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 blah. You see, the retrograde is affecting me already. Trining Neptune here, right? La, la, la. Venus trining why do I keep saying that? Neptune is going to almost kind of bring that element of trust and beauty into the mix. So that's an energy that's going to be like aiding this process, almost like beaming from the other side, like, come on, this is all happening for a reason. You can do it, and bring the beauty, bring the grace. So that's going to be like really strong, and the emotional component of that as well, right? Because Neptune in Pisces, Venus in Scorpio, is a lot of water. So there might be a lot of, not just, the air element that's up in the air right now, literally, but it's also this water element where there could be a lot of emotional content within that plunger. Is literally the plunger with all the emotional wetness, you know. That's yeah. Spencer, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I think that all these planets are sort of in places that are fairly uncomfortable for them right now, right? And I think that that alone requires adjustment, requires compromise. You look at Mars being in the house of Venus, and think about it like the planet in the house is the potter. This is a metaphor I heard from Martine Hermes, another astrologer I respect quite a bit. And the planet that's hosting that planet, Venus, is going to be the clay. So in this case, we've got Mars that wants to, separate, take action, use the will, is being given the elements of, Venus, which is relationships, which is balance, harmony. Think about it like you've got a warrior that has been given pillows to use to like go to war with. And it's like, all right, you've got this pillow, you've got this fluffy blanket. Now go win a war. And same thing with Venus. Venus is usually trying to create harmony, but now she's hanging out in Mars's house, and they're saying to Venus, all right, create peace, but here's some whips and some chains and some swords. So it's awkward for these planets, and it's going to take a lot of our patience. I think it's going to take a lot of like micro adjustments to be able to find the right mix to hopefully get us to a place where maybe we don't get every single thing that we want, but we get enough of a sense of balance and temperance so that we can be functional within our social spheres. Because this is really something that's bringing an awareness of the social agreements and oaths and contracts that we have with one another to make, society function properly.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And we see also for this like proper functioning, we're having also this trine to the sun, right? Of Saturn Sun trine, which for me also speaks to like that level of how we can create structures that will function better, structures that will be more fair. That trine and Saturn wants us to it puts these limitations there so we can create structures. It's not just just like, oh, Saturn's bad. No, Saturn just wants us to get real, get real with what's happening and create the right structures.
Well, and one thing I'll add, Tatiana, is that the exaltation of Saturn happens in Libra as well. So like Saturn's best expression is bringing things into balance and into equilibrium by reducing that which is excessive, but also increasing that which is lacking. This is something that I think that sometimes we misconstrue Saturn, is that it always is something that just carte blanche takes things away. And I think that Saturn can give gifts and rewards over time, because of the proper, mature actions that we take. And I think you're absolutely right about thinking about it as this structure, but also like a blueprint. I read somewhere that
blueprint, I like that word.
Yeah, Saturn is like the blueprint, whereas Jupiter is the person that's reading the plans to construct everything, right? So so we're kind of renegotiating what our actual agreed upon ideals are as a community, because we're being given changing circumstances. I mean, life has changed significantly in the last 15, 16 months. And we're trying to figure out, what are these new agreements that we have with one another? What is this new society that we're going to build with the reality, like you were saying, that we have now versus the one that we may wish we have had from the past or something like that?
Yeah. And that might tie in the Venus and Jupiter square here. With that, I was thinking of Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. She's kind of a Venus and Scorpio figure. She's quite Venusian. She's elegant and beautiful, and wants to create some sort of equality and free the slaves, but she has dragons and she's not afraid to use them.
There you go. It's perfect.
So, and square Jupiter, like she's on a mission. She wants to create this society for everyone, that in her view, this is the right way for society to be. And kind of taking that in, what kind of crusade are we willing to go on, and should we use our dragons when we are embarking on this endeavor, or should we use a more diplomatic nature?
Yeah, it's a good question. We could be asking ourselves
I don't
that all
know.
month.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't know.
And because this is also a time of like deep catharsis, as we see with Mercury, Pluto square, with like Venus and Scorpio, like it's kind of cathartic. I think it's also a good time to, for example, use art as an expression. If we need to express some deep feelings, it could be through art, it could be through movement, it could be through, some kind of artistic expression that kind of takes that pressure ball out into something that can be created. Like I can imagine Venus creating a beautiful work of art with those swords and and chains and whips.
Yeah.
And there goes a sculpture, right?
Sure.
That says no war, peace is better, and then that creates this significant I don't know, like relationship to how we are co-creators of reality. And that's why Saturn there is also asking us, how are we going to create this reality, and it's an Aquarius, so it's really our social and the humanity. As a humanity, what are the new things that we're bringing? It's the Aquarian paradigm. How are we going to express that? And it's up to us to create that new reality. The collective will decide on that new reality. So this is crucial, I think, this month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the collective is the key word. I think Saturn binds us to things and says, this is your duty now. And, in Aquarius, it's saying, what actions are you going to take for the good of the collective, and not necessarily what is your own particular individual desire, because sometimes that can conflict with the good of the whole. So we have to figure out, how do we balance out our own individual needs with this greater call right now to be able to contribute to a well-balanced society, a well-balanced collective. Because I think that one of the things that Saturn and Aquarius is teaching us on a very deep level is that our individual actions do affect our neighbor. They do affect other countries, other cities, other people, even the air that we breathe, we share, so it's kind of, those things are really being put front and center to be able to reckon with as we move forward.
Yeah. And finally, with Mercury starting to go under the beams of the sun, so Mercury starts to get burnt up by the sun when it comes in within 15 degrees of the sun. So did you want to mention anything about that, Spencer?
Yeah, it's a Mercury that is sort of, the medieval authors would think about it as a Mercury that is taking to its sickbed, right? It's an old Mercury at the very end of its synodic cycle, which is basically a fancy word for its relationship to the sun. And it's tying up loose ends. This is really a great time to like untie old agreements, question the contracts that you've been committed to for a long period of time, so that you can become free, to be able to engage with the present and the future. Sometimes what really makes it difficult for us to create new agreements is we get attached to how things have always been and the actions that brought us success in the past. And I think that what Mercury's doing by going at the end of its cycle, going under the beams, is saying, all right, now it's time to really question those ties and say, just because something worked in the past does not mean that that's the exact way we should do it in the future. In fact, we may cause extra suffering if we try to do something the exact same way.
Yeah, which I guess ties in the fact that it's retrograde too. You are kind of reevaluating all of those contracts, and once it's in the heart of the sun, you're probably going to get that illumination.
Right.
Of, this is a new
That's
way
the
for me to
key.
go.
That's the key with the sun. Is illumination is an awesome word for it, because it brings awareness to whatever function that we're, having contact with. In this case, communication, commerce with Mercury, like the exchanges. Mercury was a planet that went between the boundaries, right, of different worlds. So this is definitely a time we're going to be, going between worlds, trying to make meaningful exchanges with one another. And one other final thing you can think about with Mercury is that when it goes retrograde, an author that I like a lot, Robert Schmidt, says that it's being recalled to the witness stand. So there's some extra testimony that perhaps had been missed the first time around, and it's recalled with new information to be able to present so that you can make a judgment on where to go forward.
Right. All right, let's move on to the next slide here. So the next date that I had kind of pinpointed was October 6th, with the new moon in Libra at 13 degrees Libra. And on that same day, we have Pluto going direct. Now Pluto is an outer planet and stays in retrograde and stays direct for quite a long period of time. So let's start with the new moon in Libra, and then if we have anything to add about Pluto, we can do that. So here is the new moon in Libra at 13 degrees. Tatiana, did you want to say anything about that?
Whenever we have a new moon, well, we all know that these are like beginnings again, and because we've been thinking about what we're planting, the new seeds we're going to plant, and these are brand new seeds that we're like putting in the ground and making sure they're going to bloom. And I also noticed that in here we have an opposition to Chiron, right? And you see Chiron over there. It's in opposition, like slight opposition, like a 3-degree orb opposition to this new moon. So there is not anything without its deal of having to look also into the pain, right? And Chiron, it's the deepest wounds of the soul. And when it comes kind of directly related to our sense of self, which is our feminine masculine balance, right? The sun, the yang, and the moon, the yin. And this is like almost like when it comes together, that sacred marriage is we're always being brought back to center, to what are we planting, what are we? And with Chiron there, I almost feel like what has wounded our relationships, or how have we not, because that Chiron in Aries is about not being almost loved, felt like my own identity doesn't even exist. I'm very wounded, sense of self-worth, or even the desire to even take action is so much fear there. And when we have like something like this involving Chiron, there's almost like I have the sense that coming into that balance with ourselves and others can begin to heal that wound of like separation, of feeling that we don't really belong to a collective, or that we have to do it on our own, have to and that's part of like that. I feel that deep healing process, and I'm talking more from the the evolutionary perspective, or the psychological perspective, where there's this thing. It just doesn't only come with without like its fair share of pain. And with Mars there as well, there's gonna be, Mars, it's action, right? So it's the action planet. We have to start doing, like actually making those commitments, making those things tangible, not just talk about it, but really start acting upon that. And I've been saying about how this period of time is also very cathartic, but the catharsis also happens through relationship, not just me here in my own corner of the world. It happens through relating to others. The pain, the triggers might come up through relationships. It's like, you did this, I did that, I'm hurt, how can we come to an agreement where we can come back to our balance, our center, and then plant those seeds of of newness, of a new understanding with more compassion. I feel that's a little bit what's what at least what comes to me. I don't know if Spence would have something to add to that, or Dulcie.
I just wanted to quickly add, with Mars being right in the mix at the same degree, at 13 degrees, you know, the focus is achieving diplomacy and achieving harmony. But with Mars there, Mars is not the planet that you want for achieving diplomacy. Mars is the one who is going to get right in the fight and tell you how it is and tell you what you need to be doing. So we're going to have to be a little bit creative with that Mars if we're wanting to achieve that kind of harmonious society and harmonious environment around us. Yeah, he's a bit more direct and aggressive rather than collaborative.
Yeah, I think this is a beginning of a challenging period of time. I don't think that there's any beating around the bush that this is going to be some of the more challenging astrology of the year, especially with all of these new synodic cycles with Mars and Mercury coming up. This decan, just a little preview of the decans, is a Saturn ruled decan. Each of these 10-degree sections has its own planetary ruler. And in this case, Saturn is really making us aware of the types of obligations and agreements and negotiations that we have to make to fulfill our responsibilities. And it's not always easy to do. Sometimes Saturn can also distribute a big reality check. There is a fixed star that is actually very close to this 13 degrees called Algorab that I think plays an archetypal story with this as well. Algorab is in the constellation Corvus, the crow. And the crow was given a task to fill the sacred cup of Apollo. And he failed to complete this task because he got distracted by earthly delights, by like these beautiful, tasty figs or these shiny objects. And he was riding on the back of the serpent Hydra. And instead of owning up to his indiscretion, he lied and blamed the Hydra snake for his failing. And so there's a couple things we can glean from that. First of all, I think it's very important to stay focused on your goals around this period of time. I think it's very easy to get distracted by things that may not be good for you, that may be just more sensual rather than spiritual. And I think that could create conflict with Mars there. And I think it's very important with this Mars to maintain your integrity. I think it's very important to tell the truth, like Tatiana was saying earlier, and be able to be honest about where you're coming from, because there is a big, I don't know, what I see astrology, this type of astrology, I feel like we are receiving certain impulses that aren't necessarily coming directly from us, like maybe us as a collective, but not as individuals. And we can either choose to use that energy in the way that we feel guided to, or we can use our own character and our own mental discipline to be able to maybe say, I feel this, but I know that that's not necessarily the right way to act. So I have to choose this other way of being. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I really do think we're going to be challenged at this new moon to have honest negotiations and not fall prey to our lower selves because we are feeling like we're not getting what we want out of a contractual negotiation.
And something to remember, or is what you see about what we choose to do with that energy. Well, the highest expression of Mars is courage, is fearlessness. So it's also going with this fearless attitude to say what we need to say and do what we need to do. And like you say, we can choose to just be angry and lash out, and Mercury can also go get us back to the anger and the pain, especially with that opposition to Chiron, and like all this energy can just point back to anger and to resentment, and so
And
what
gossip is another thing,
gossip,
right?
and
Because this is a passive
yeah,
aggressive Mars. This is not a
yes,
direct Mars,
it's nasty gossip, right?
right?
So
Yeah,
instead of taking that energy like that, how about we're brave to look within? So it's, and again,
sure,
with Mercury retrograding, what is more brave, to gossip about someone and point fingers like this,
right.
or to go, oh my gosh, every time I point a finger out, I should be doing this, and be
Yep.
brave enough to look into my own pain, my own, where are the deepest soul wounds that I have that I am projecting onto others with this anger. So the real, I believe, real challenge for this Mars is to be courageous enough to look within, and within the nasty parts of relationships. And we need to air out the dirty laundry. This is kind of that time, and that's the courage that's required. And many people might be not scared about going out and fighting, but very scared to even peek within and see the pain of their own wounds. And I think that's the courage we need to have now. And really good time again to get real, get raw, and really open the heart to be vulnerable and find safe containers to do it. Otherwise it could get messy and nasty and defensive, like it could get like well, you know what I mean. So yeah, the courage to look within,
Well, and Tatiana, just to add one more thing to that, is the last decan of Libra speaks a lot about creating peace in situations of chaos by becoming centered yourself, rather than always seeking out, an external peace. You can bring peace to a situation that feels chaotic by centering yourself, by becoming calm within. And I think that's going to be really put to the test throughout this lunation cycle, is how do you bring peace from the inside out, rather than getting tossed about on the wheel of fortune or the wheel of fate and then bemoaning it and blaming, and like you said, pointing fingers. A lot of the times what's required of us is to bring that balance to a situation, rather than always, feeling like a victim if we don't get it externally, right? So I think that, yeah, I love that we've got a lot of Virgo energy, Tatiana, between the two of you. And I think a lot of our answer is always like, work on yourself. Just,
I know, it's work on yourself, improve yourself,
right.
like totally. And yeah, that's the invitation I think that people like you and I have for people, is to show that that does pay off, right? When you actually do that kind of work, it does pay off. And we can only just suggest, right? We cannot make anybody do it, cannot heal anybody. Everybody's responsible for their own healing. And there's plenty of people out there to aid this process. We are going through this massive transformation on planet Earth, where there is a lot of now of psychological damage as well. So yeah, how are we going to do this? And with this, like, the invitation always to be centered is like sun and moon always coming together, is almost that, like, and in Libra is really also highlighting that masculine, feminine, yin yang energy, kind of back here, stay in the center, that's how
in communication too, right? I mean, a lot of the things that the disagreements and arguments and that we get into are simply through misunderstanding. And this, again, with Mars as part of this new moon, there may be a temptation to, like, outwardly be like, when in the background you've got the knife ready to stab someone. So you know what I'm saying? Because it's kind of that, like, you have to be, like, have the courage, as you were saying, to be able to voice what you're really truly feeling. The real meaning of integrity is having a union between your inner and your outer self. That's really, I think, to me, when I think of integrity, that's what it means to me. So be willing to voice your truth in a diplomatic way, but not to the point where you're completely repressing either your own needs or where you're completely not acknowledging the needs of the other party, right? Because that's going to help you to go back and forth to ultimately come to something that's acceptable for both people.
Yeah, so everyone, nonviolent communication, check out Marshall Rosenberg. It's a good time to get those tools. Those are practical tools, and I'm saying practical. If you don't know how to communicate, well, there's tools out there, and I'm just giving you one. That's for everybody. I'm just saying.
So I think that was all perfectly said. Should we move on to, does anybody want to add anything for Pluto turning direct in Capricorn?
Well, it's because all these planets are going direct. It's just Pluto's gonna go direct, Saturn direct. Like, we're gonna have a lot of shift from these planets that have been not like dormant, but it feels like the shifts are all internal. When the planets are retrograde, it's almost like the whole psyche is getting revamped in the thought realm. When it goes direct, it starts really showing up in reality, all those changes. So I don't know what Spencer, what do you want to say about Pluto going direct?
Yeah, I mean those outer planets turn retrograde at least once a year, and I think you're right that a lot of those processes may be more internalized behind the scenes, a review process for what they represent. Um, you know, Pluto in this area of Capricorn has a lot of significations with government bureaucratic structures. So I think that there's been a lot of review about how we govern while Pluto has been retrograde. And we may start to see some of those changes externalized as Pluto begins to move forward in this area of the zodiac, like new rules, new regulations, new plunger action when it comes to maybe some of the challenges that have built up over time by maybe through not dealing with something that needed to be worked through. So this might be the moment where things begin to become somewhat unstuck. I wanted to add one more thing to this because I don't know, what's the next date in your slide, Dulcie? Because I was going to say on the next day.
Just trying to, unmute myself and move forward at the same time. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, okay. So you've got this here, but I thought that in addition to Pluto moving direct, Venus moving into Sagittarius, conjoining the South Node, is a really big shift within that same 2-day period, because that's the host of the new moon. We have Venus that's going to be in a space that's really uncomfortable, and then it's moving into I guess it's gaining dignity by not being debilitated, but it's going right into the conjunction with the South Node. And to me, this is a space where South Node is about decrease. South Node in Vedic astrology was the severed body of a dragon or a demon that is processing old karma, old experiences, old form. And Venus going into a place like Sagittarius 1, the first 10 degrees, is asking us to compost our attraction potentially either to speed and movement, but also to beliefs that are contagious. So this is a period of time where for us to come into these new agreements, we have to compost and release some old, knowing, right? Mercury is the planet that questions. Jupiter, the host of Sagittarius, says, I know this. This is my belief. This is my dogma. So there may be some things that we have to let go of with that Venus conjoining the South Node to be able to move forward into the new, more harmonious reality.
And to add to that a little bit is because, the North Node in Gemini that has been going on for a while already, and is soon going to move into Taurus. This has been raising those questions of like plurality of like like nobody really knows the truth. There's multiple layers of truth. And
Mm.
by releasing that, or composting, like you say, what I believe is true, I know this is true because I reviewed the, I don't know what, so and so video or paper, or
We did the
and
research, quote unquote.
I did my research, I know it's true. And it's funny because I've been
Right.
having these conversations with people, and
Yeah.
some people say like, well, I can tell you the science of this, no, but I heard this very renowned person say that. I say, well, it's opposite information. Like, who do I believe? Right. So I think at this moment in time, it's really important to not be attached to any particular one truth, because we do live in a multi-dimensional, layered quantum universe. And that's, I mean, from my perspective, right? Not saying that that's the truth, just saying
Yeah,
that's
and
the
well,
one I live in.
I
So
think you're absolutely right, Tatiana. There is relative truth, and then the great question is there absolute truth? And this is what people have been arguing about for millennia. I think that the key here is how can we let our relative truths feed a collective functionality? Because I think that's the problem that we have right now, is that everybody's relative truth is somewhat in conflict with each other's relative truth, and that's leading to a lot of disharmony in the collective. And Saturn is really saying, okay, learn your relative truths, but at some point you're going to have to figure out a way to get along with one another, and to have a functional society. And this is going to be happening with this Mars and Mercury Cazimi. I think we had Mars Cazimi on the 8th, right? We sort of skipped over that, but those two things are happening almost simultaneously, right? But I like this energy of we are increasing questioning different pathways and decreasing that certainty. And sometimes it's, instead of just even doing it consciously, it just happens to us too. Like, I don't know about all of you, but in the last couple years, what's increased for me just around me is like, well, I don't know what's going to happen today. Like, I don't have certainty about what this reality is anymore. Like, I
100%.
don't, I don't know what the news is going to be tomorrow, or whatever happened before is not something I can base my future on. Right.
Even beliefs that I've held for a long time, or beliefs that I would assume that I would have today based on what I believed before all of this, are just not stable anymore.
Right.
There's just,
Right.
I don't know. I think this is true, but I have no idea.
yeah. And from my perspective about, this could be a whole like debate on truth. It's like, because it's almost like aligning with the frequency of, like radio stations. Like, in this radio station, this is the truth. In this one, I moved the dial, that's the truth, that's the truth. But they're all existing at the same time. Right. And that's a very Aquarian, Uranian energy, the field of quantum possibilities, which is basically everything. So like you say, relative truths, they all exist in their own bandwidth. So what I think is like, okay, which radio station like basically plays the most harmonious music? I wouldn't say the nicest, like the most harmonious, right? Where we can go, okay, this actually, this sounds good. This feels peaceful. And I think that's what we want to aim as a collective, is to tune into bandwidth. Right now, we're like in this, when you move the dial and you have like nothing, everything's a blur and a mumble, and then it goes from one side to the next, or you have like 10 radios sounding at the same time, and it's cacophony basically. So as we tune back into what is going to be our next actual collective paradigm, let's say, that we can all share at some point, maybe not everybody, but at least as a global consciousness.
I love that word. I love that word, paradigm, because it was a huge paradigm shift that we just went through, isn't it?
Exactly. And what we're trying to get to is a paradigm that brings us peace as humans, peace and harmony. Don't we all want that? Like, I don't think there's one single human being that does not like peace and love. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but
I think everybody has different versions of what that means to them. I think some people are willing to step on other people for it. I think, and some people aren't, and that's some of the things that we're dealing with right now. Is, to some people, their individual freedom, peace, or whatnot, they're willing to pursue that at the expense of others. Whereas there are some people that are like, well, when one person is suffering, the collective suffers, which I think is closer to the truth, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really the big question that we have moving forward is, are we going to be willing to understand that concept that when we can't truly have peace until it is equally distributed?
Yeah. Yeah. And the willingness to have enough humility to give up. It's that it's, and I don't like the word like sacrifice because it's not kind of the word, but it's almost like what's that word again? It's not sacrifice. It's like when you willingly and humbly give up of yourself so everybody can benefit. And I think that requires that like humility, right? Humility to say, okay, I'm not necessarily right. I'm just standing this line of the spectrum, and I stand here, and that's all we can do is just like I stand here and not try to push it onto others. Like no more crusading, right? That's what I'm trying to say. I know the truth.
Well, and people, I think that especially in like metaphysical communities, a lot of people have created success by being outliers, by not conforming to, I don't know, society, by living on the fringe. And now we've got this situation where it does require kind of participating as a group rather than saying, well, I know best because I've had success in the past by not conforming. And to me, Saturn on some level says there is a necessity to adapt. It's practical common survival sense to adapt to certain situations rather than saying, well, I've always, because the collective says I need to do this, that they must be wrong. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that that's been a shift for me personally, mentally, is I've lived a life of nonconformity, being a musician, an astrologer, and there's been lots of things that I've had to do in the last 2 years that I would not have considered with the circumstances as they are now versus before. And that's where the humility comes in and says, you know what, maybe I don't have all the answers here. And, it's that we're just trying to survive.
And the shadow side of Aquarius is also it's alienation. That is the shadow side. And
absolutely.
And we could totally get there.
Yep.
Like I know best because this works, like you said, this works. Therefore, now we become, instead of together and working as a network, which is the most positive side of Aquarius, is this collaboration in this beautiful interrelated fabric. But what could happen is like these kind of subgroups form and then we're alienated from each other. That's the shadow side. I mean, I don't know, Dulcie, if you want to add something as an Aquarian, what do you think about it?
No, I mean, I think you guys have pretty much summed it up. I do understand the disinterest in conforming, and the past year and a half has definitely highlighted those differences amongst people, those who are willing to conform for certain reasons, those who are not willing to conform for different reasons. And it is difficult to find the truth in there. Maybe less so than more so than it was before.
Indeed.
Should we, Tatiana?
Yes, we move on to
well, we just skipped over, if you guys want to, we can talk about the Mars Cazimi.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We kind of skipped over that.
Yeah, for us here in Victoria, it's 8:10 p.m. on the October 7th, but for Spencer, it'll be like midnight-ish, 1 a.m. On October 8th. Right. So Mars Cazimi at 15 degrees Libra.
So Mars goes through about a 2-year cycle where it goes all the way around the wheel of the zodiac. So the last Cazimi, the last conjunction with the sun, happened roughly in September of 2019. So we're looking all the way back to that period of time to figure out what the previous seed of this, last cycle was.
Back when we were babies.
Right, right. If you think about September 2019, life was, it feels like a lifetime ago,
I don't
doesn't
know,
it?
yeah.
It's the reality that at that point it was completely different than the reality that we're living now.
Yeah.
So I'm nervous a little bit about this, Cazimi, for a few reasons. Both the sun and Mars are unhappy in this particular area of the zodiac. We've got the sun in its fall and Mars in its exile, not their preferred places. I think that this has a potential to feel uncomfortable. I think that's the first word that comes into my mind is this is the beginning of I think a conflict. And I think that Mars always initiates conflicts. I was thinking back to my own personal experience around that time, and I can remember in my personal life there was one very big conflict that I won't go into here, but it had a big impact on my family life.
Mhm.
And this is also something where we're planting the seed for our new will that we're going to use moving forward. I think of Mars as courage because of the circumstances that it brings us. Not that it's just pure courage itself. Mars is a planet it's a nocturnal planet, which is related to the moon and fortune. But Mars being a malefic is the negative fortune that comes to us, the things that aren't really our fault that happen, okay? And it takes courage and willpower to overcome those events. It's not just that Mars is like, oh, you've got a great Mars, like, you must have a great will. Well, if you've got a great Mars in your chart, you've probably experienced some things in your life that have required you to cultivate that character quality, So I think that this is a time period where, we're going to have to utilize that ability to make adjustments, right? And to renegotiate our will and how we use our will.
Perhaps our first utilization of our Mars energy is not necessarily the best one.
Right.
When we are confronted with something, we tend to react with, saying something that we didn't mean, or some people get into physical fights. Things like that are, our amygdala is triggered, and that's our immediate response. But what you're saying, once we've been faced with these kinds of scenarios frequently, we tend to build up a better Mars, and
Yes.
we're able to kind of use our courage and use our directness for good rather than aggression.
I have Mars natally in Libra, and it's also this Mars is also the one that wants to fight for the underdog. It fights for justice. It has that quality of maybe not asserting itself so personally, like this is what I want, but it's like for example, whenever I work with the groups, I know that I tend to step back a little bit so that everybody is given a chance to express, be, even sometimes to the detriment of what I would personally want. And it's interesting because it does feel like it doesn't have its like, I'm gonna get this, the end. It's mine and I don't care who I'm stepping over. So it does seem like, hey, well, nobody's looking at this person, the little boy behind that nobody looks at. It's like that kind of energy of like nobody's like seeing this person, or so it does have that quality of fighting for the the less fortunate, or the ones that tend to end up with the short end of the stick. So this is how I think we should mostly use this energy. Otherwise, like you say, it could turn into a more I don't know, there could be this like I mean not aggression, but yeah, I mean, you know what I mean.
I think
Yeah.
what you're saying is that it's easy for this Mars position to get roused to anger or to be able to fight on behalf of the other, not necessarily on behalf of the self. And that's something to keep in mind with this Mars Cazimi, is that there may be something initiated where our, fighting instincts are aroused, not for our own behalf, but because we view some other injustice in our life. And, that's not necessarily the most comfortable thing for Mars, but, it doesn't mean that we can't utilize that energy in the way that it's being asked to be utilized to create something fair eventually, right?
Yeah.
And this is Venus's sign too. So Venus, Libra is wanting to bring things together, but Mars here is separating things. So there may be a painful separation with things that belong together, and we have to do the hard, courageous work to bring them back together.
Yeah, and it could be a beneficial severing as well.
Sure.
Something that needs to happen. Okay, and we did discuss Venus entering Sagittarius a little bit as we kind of talked about Venus being conjunct the South Node.
Mhm.
Is there anything else to add about Venus entering Sagittarius?
I mean, it's
leaving
moving
Scorpio?
from the house of Mars to the house of Jupiter, and I think that's a positive thing. I think that it's always easier for a benefic to draw upon benefic resources rather than malefic ones to do its work. So I like to think of the interaction between Venus and Jupiter as
Yeah.
Jupiter being more merit-based good fortune and honor that you create, where Venus is more about what comes to you through just being yourself, through just like opening to receive.
Yeah.
So I think that we may receive some good things based on some of maybe the good actions that we took in the past. And Jupiter in Aquarius 3 is really about leaving the past behind and going off into the unknown, untying old karmic bonds and knots. So again, that's echoed with Venus conjoining the South Node, is it's a really great time to release the past so that you can move forward into a better sense of harmony.
All right. We have quite a few slides left, so I'm going to just
Yeah, let's
Told
kind
you we were
of
long.
move on forward.
Tatiana, I can talk your ear off forever.
forever and ever and ever.
I
We're
mean, both of
teachers,
you, I
man.
think, are good for that. Yeah.
Neptune, ow, ow.
Okay, so we talked about Venus in the South Node, and we also have Mercury Cazimi. We talked about Mercury kind of going under the beams. Now Mercury is completely conjunct the Sun in Libra. Any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think that with the Mars, we
Yeah.
may be shown what the problem is at the Mars Cazimi, and then Mercury coming into Cazimi says, "All right, how do we negotiate this?" Mercury is always kind of trying to bargain and make a deal, and this may be the initial moment of like, "All right, we understand the problem. We understand where we're going to need to fight for and what we're going to have courage about. Now, here's the exchanges that are going to have to take place to be able to create the new deal, the new oath, the new contract."
Yeah,
Mars Cazimi is the initial trigger, and
Right.
the Mercury Cazimi is okay. Now, what are we going to do?
I wanted to kind of read a little passage from the Archetypal Universe, by Ren Butler, our mentor too, that about the Sun, Mercury, Mars, and this could go either way depending on how we harness the energy. So on its positive side, it's an eager and passionate mind, a gift for dynamic communication, a capacity to make plans and act quickly. That's what we want to be able to harness with this energy. Or it could go like sideways if we just go to the shadow side, is mental restlessness and agitation, a rash and impulsive way of communicating, in your face directness. So it just depends on how we harness this energy, because in a conjunction, it is just the power blend of the three planets. But however we express it depends on what level of consciousness we want to bring to this or align with this energy. So yeah, it could just make it for like a really dynamic and action oriented, let's make the plan for this to be in effect and action, and we're all good. I mean, it could be just that. So
Well, Mercury conjoins Mars that day too. So if
mm,
you are going to have, I think that you could have a great, brilliant idea that comes to you. Like, I think the sun represents that, like, aha moment on some level. Um, but just be careful that if you're having a negotiation, if you're having an important conversation, that you consider your words and their effect on other people, because the combination of Mercury and Mars could lead to, like, being argumentative or being like, yeah, exactly, get the claws coming out a little bit. So that's something to be aware of around this period of time for sure.
mm,
One thing I wanted to mention before we move on is we won't get to this in October, but if you're tracking that Mars Cazimi cycle, it will emerge from under the beams on November the 22nd at 15 degrees of Scorpio. So that's whatever is initiated around this period of time, we may see come to fruition, both at that period of time for Mars, but Mercury will emerge from the beams on the 18th of October at 10 degrees of Libra. So something, those are dates to mark down for the fruition of whatever is started at these cycles that becomes visible.
Interesting. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see on a collective level, but also just individually.
Right.
All right, let's move on. Saturn turning direct in Aquarius on October 10th. That's in the evening.
Yeah. Yeah, Saturn. I think that Saturn retrograde has made Saturn function less predictably. Whenever a malefic planet is going retrograde, it's not really doing what it wants as consistently. So I think that we've seen a lot of inconsistency with the types of rules, regulations, boundaries that make up the fabric of society. This is one thing that I was thinking about with Saturn is when we talk about that blueprint, we need limits in a society so that there's not just abject chaos. We need to have ones that are reasonable, that we can agree to as a collective. But if we didn't have any of that structure, it's sort of like a body without a skeleton, like we'd just be a puddle of mush on the ground. Yeah, exactly. Like Tatiana. We need that. We need that skeletal system. And I think that, think of maybe Saturn retrograde as having a broken bone that is finally set and has healed. And we've been doing the rest period, and now it's like, okay, we've reviewed these rules that we are trying to agree upon. Now we're going to implement them in, and move forward. So I think that this actually could be the return of some potentially restrictions, a need to leave behind the past, but a liberation though. A liberation through our discipline, through being able to rise above in that 30,000-foot view and see all the connections and the reasons why we're creating these new rules or these new types of things. I really do think having structure in your life can be a liberating thing rather than just a feeling of restriction when it brings things back into balance.
Spoken like a true Virgo.
I need my systems.
So Saturn has been moving retrograde from May 23rd to October 10th, between the degrees of 13 and 6 of Aquarius. I don't know about you guys, but in my personal life, I have felt this quite significantly. And you might feel it more if it's hovering over planets or making strong aspects with planets within those degrees. But it was a period of a real Saturnian feeling that like that negation or even like a lack of discipline for a little while.
Right.
And not quite knowing what to do with that. But now it's kind of, once it turns direct, it'll be a more constructive, potentially, Saturn of recognizing, I guess the benefits in being structured and being disciplined. And I've definitely felt that in my own life, and I have seen that around in other people as well.
Totally. I definitely agree that a retrograde Saturn can lead to a lack of discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and that it may actually feel better when it moves forward.
It was quite uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And having that be the traditional ruler of, like important planets in your chart, that could have felt like you were stuck. And like normally you would have that ability to um, consider all the ramifications of everything and choose delayed gratification and all these things that Saturn is known for. And now that'll be functioning better for you. And you hopefully that'll help you to move forward in your personal life and also us as a collective.
Yeah. Tatiana, did you want to add anything?
No, I think you just said everything really very perfectly.
Why, thank you. All right, let's move on to October 17th, unless anybody had anything between that week time period that they really wanted to discuss.
I don't think so. There's a Sun Jupiter trine on the 15th, but
yeah,
that's just some nice energy.
good to focus on some of the nice stuff as well.
Yeah,
right.
right.
Over, you mean? Yeah.
I mean, that's to me that's a third decan Libra Sun trine, third decan of Aquarius Jupiter. So just the little readjustments that will lead to a harmonious moving on. So between like the 13th and the 16th or so, you may find that you have the ability to make those adjustments moving forward that'll lead to feeling better and feeling released and liberated from some of the challenges of the past.
Yeah. What I feel with this energy of Jupiter's Sun is actual hope. That's the word that comes through. It's a real sense of hope. Like this kind of sigh, like it's like a deep breath of like, okay, we're seeing that there is a possibility. That's how this energy, even though it passes quite quickly, but
we're gonna need it because look at the next aspect of the Sun.
Yeah, exactly.
Like because square to Pluto.
This is where we need to like, okay, brace yourselves, get that deep breath.
Yeah.
Because
ready to dive in again.
Yeah, like now, like let's hang on tight because what's coming the next, it's gonna be like boom, 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 even the next like couple months. So this is that time to go take your deep breath, take your vacation, reset your energy, make sure you're strong, and keep that hope as like your flag. Like, because when shit hits the fan again, we want to remember that
there's an image that came up, Tatiana, when you were saying that. I'm imagining like an old school pool cleaner who would have to dive to the bottom of the pool to remove all of the junk and leaves that are clogging the filter. And that's going to be our Sun Pluto square, but you got to come up for air first to be able to dive back down to clog it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So brace yourselves for that Sun Pluto.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to Sun Pluto on October 17th, and that's happening in the morning. At least.
What do you think, Dulcie?
Well, so this is actually, I had said something at the beginning where we're experiencing a compromise where nobody really feels like a winner. I think this is definitely one of those times. We're kind of bumping up against authority figures, government, those kind of fun things. And it's not a pleasant interaction. It's a square. It's the sun in Libra and it's fall. So it's really, our sense of identity and will is not being acknowledged. And we don't really feel like we're getting anywhere.
Yeah, multiple planets are going to go through this square with Pluto this month, right? We've got a Mercury square, a Mars square coming up later in the month, this Sun square. So each of them are going to have a little bit of a different flavor. Not a tasty one. Like each of them are going to make us, regurgitate in some other like
those Harry Potter beans.
Right, exactly. We're going to get a bunch of earwax jelly beans this month, or the vomit flavored ones. But I think that the Sun Pluto, definitely the Sun being related also to awareness, but also authority figures, like you were mentioning, that where some corruption is exposed with people in power. I also have seen themes of abduction come up with Sun Pluto. I remember about a year, maybe 2 years ago, there were some protests in Portland where there was a Sun Pluto opposition. And the United States government had started literally abducting people in unmarked vans and taking them to a secret location. And that reflects Hades erupting from the underworld to abduct Persephone to bring her down to the underworld. So I think that there could be themes of like that come back, but also exposing the systemic. Remember, we talked about Pluto and Capricorn as the governing structures, exposing systemic corruption that needs to be dealt with, that needs readjustment, like that third decan Libra is asking us to do, is to fine tune all the dials, like Tatiana was saying, like making the radio adjustment. I think that, this is a tough month.
It really is.
There's
Yeah.
no getting around it. Tatiana and I both try to put some positive spin on this, but it's a tough one, and it's okay to acknowledge that it's tough. Like sometimes the key to acknowledging and getting through something is acknowledging that we're having a difficult time, rather than.
One of my favorite phrases from counseling is, right now I'm not okay, and that's okay.
Right. Exactly.
I love that. So,
and with Pluto, honestly, if from the psychological perspective, Pluto, whenever Pluto comes in contact with something, it really wants to expose really that what needs to be released is like the attachments we have. For example, with the sun is the ego attachment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Pluto comes around, it's like it shows the dirtiest, worst part of it, so we can go like, do you really want to keep this? It's like this shit's been piling up and up. Like you want to keep like rolling in the spiral. That's why it's so uncomfortable, because when it emerges, you're like, oh, and it's going to have this contact with Mercury, with Mars, with the sun, and it's like showing the themes of how dark each planet could be, so we can make a conscious choice about the next structure or the next way of being. And Pluto, when it comes around, it's like, it's the butterfly effect. Like it gets through it and it's like it discards, and the because it's uncomfortable, the difference between people who can actually accept this discomfort and sit with it and go, okay, I'm going to look within, these people will suffer less.
Yes.
When people are attached to their ego, their ways of being, their own anger, the things they don't want to release, and there's like, I won't let go. Well, Pluto goes like, well, you will. And here's how. And then pain. And then there's suffering. So a way to avoid this pain and suffering is knowing Pluto's coming. It's good. I need to sit in the discomfort. I'm going to look at it bravely. I'm going to look at the themes. I'm going to look at the shit, and I'm going to release it, like consciously. And if this process is done consciously, there's less probability of suffering. Pain might be there, but no suffering. So it's almost up to each person how you want to live this, because the energy is going to be there, whether we like it or not. It archetypally, it's there and it's happening, and we will see it in the world play out. So
Tatiana, I wanted to say, I love all of that, and that the way that I succinctly put it a lot on the channel is, we can't avoid pain. Pain is part of life, but we choose to suffer through either fighting against it or accepting it. It doesn't mean that we accept abuse. It just means that there are going to be periods of time that are where we're at the bottom of the wheel. And this is part of the Taoist approach, is coming to an alignment with the cycles of nature. And, right now in the Northern Hemisphere, we're in a cycle of contraction. Everything is returning to the earth. If you think you're going to go out and plant a tomato plant in the ground right now, you will suffer, because it's not going to grow. It's going to die. But if you accepted the fact that it's a harvest time, it's a time to do the hard work of storing and of releasing that old plant. Think about it like this. We had tomato plants on our porch, and we just recently pulled them out of their pots and tossed the plant into the compost pile. We harvested the fruit this was at the end of Virgo season. And if we had gone under the impression that we were going to keep that plant alive, no matter what, outside, we would have suffered because it would have died, right? And that is not because we're bad people. That's not because we, don't have power. It's because that is part of the natural cycle that we have to come to terms with, that is a power and a force greater than us. Yes, we could have done a few things to extend its life and things like that, but it's much easier and much less effort, right? To just say, you know what? It served its purpose. It gave us an abundant bounty, and now we're thanking it by returning it to the earth to create the compost to be able to fuel the next cycle. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the key, right? Is knowing that by letting go, we are actually facilitating the nutrients for the next cycle that wants to be born. And so it's less about what are we giving up, it's about what are we really pouring our energy into for the future. I think when you think about it like that, it becomes a lot less painful.
Yeah.
This is the time really to let go of those ego attachments.
Mm.
Otherwise, the power struggles could be immense, because like the ego does not want to die. That's part of its nature, is wanting to keep that power, right?
Right.
So at this point, when Pluto comes in, is like it's going to confront that imminent death, basically. So it's like either we release our ego attachments and our ways and our need to be right, and because this is a lot of that, like, I am right, it's me, this is what it's almost like this aggrandizement of entitlement, kind of power and entitlement, and the use of force if need be, and this is just going to be so this is time to say, okay, this is uncomfortable, it's no longer needed. Vomit it out. And
one thing I want to add to that is that there is a story in Sumerian mythology of Inanna and Ereshkigal, and that to me is a very Plutonic story. And without going into the huge long version of it, the short version is that Inanna was a version of Venus and had to go visit her sister Ereshkigal, who is maybe a version of Pluto, the lord of the underworld. She had to give up all of her adornments in the 7 gates of, I guess you could call it, hell or the underworld. And when she came face to face with Ereshkigal, she was, murdered and like hung on a hook. And someone had to come and find her. And Ereshkigal was in pain, in mourning. She was like pregnant with something and suffering. And the way that they were able to get Inanna released from the underworld was not from fighting Ereshkigal, was not from killing Ereshkigal. It was from simply listening to her suffering and to her pain and acknowledging it. That was it. It was this like saying, okay, I'm here for you. And this was something that Ereshkigal had never experienced, and said, I'll give you anything you want because you just acknowledged my pain. And they were like, well, you see that body hanging on the hook over there? We need this goddess back up here to create life, So it's all about kind of just having compassion, even if it's just compassion for yourself, that is, I think that's the most enlightened way to deal with Pluto energy, is acknowledging it and saying, yeah, this is a tough thing. And you don't always have to do anything. Sometimes you just have to let it, like you said, it's a release, it's a letting go. And the last thing I'll say about this is that with all these planets stacking up in Libra, many areas of our life are going to be affected simultaneously, because these planets are providing for all sorts of different topics in our life. They are the clay for all these different, competing interests that we have, like our home, our job, our relationships, our money, our children. All of these things are going to be like mashed up into the Libra area of our chart and facing off with the Capricorn area of our chart. So that's one thing you can do practically, is look at those 2 houses. What topics do they represent? In this chart, a Virgo rising chart, someone may be having some money challenges that are related to their children, their creativity, their desires, right? And they may have to confront. Right. I could see someone with this chart having to confront, facing an addiction, or facing like taking pleasure in a way that has become very corrupt. And they're going to have to do the hard work of saying, what really goes into my mouth, what goes into my body, which is associated with the 2nd house as well, what we feed ourselves, right? So you can look at that and extrapolate that out to your own chart to see how it might affect you going forward.
And in order to do this, just need to know where your rising sign is. So this example is for Virgo rising. So any
Right.
Virgo rising person will be fine, like being faced with this challenge, as Spencer said.
Right.
But then when you look at where your rising is, you move this little stellium here of planets. You can just move it, from house to house to find where it falls in your chart. So then personally you can go at it. And if you are a Libra person, or your birthday is around, sometime in around this date, like take 10 days after, 10 days before, 10 days after, this is going to speak to you very prominently, to your identity, to your sense of self. So have lots of compassion and, therapy.
Sure.
It's a good time, I'm telling you. Or even just hold space. If you're not being directly too much affected by this energy, be the space holder, the one that actually listens and sits and listens with compassion. You know what? That is very healing. If we want to move forward with better world, these are the little things, practical things that each one of us can do. That it's not like a huge thing. It's a small thing. If your friend has something they're confessing some kind of really deep shit they're in, and you just sit there to listen, not to coach them, not to tell them, not to fix them, just to listen. It's like, it's like not inanna,
Ereshkigal, yeah.
Agashkagal. That's a hard name to say.
Mm.
It's like Arashkagal. Like, yeah, allow that for your friends, for people. And you know what? These little acts of kindness and love really do make a change. If everybody did it, imagine how beautiful this would be. So I'm just throwing it out there as the Virgo tip.
And we have Jupiter turning direct on this day, on October 17th, which will actually help out Mercury, Mars, and the Sun a little.
Hope.
Yeah. The return of hope, right? The return of the ability to have some kind of faith in what we're doing. Just like Saturn was having difficulty creating boundaries and discipline, Jupiter retrogrades maybe having some difficulty begetting new things, and also like having hope, having faith. So there may be something where we finally are able to move forward with that. And then there'll be a trine between Mars and Jupiter within those next 2 days as well.
Yeah.
Everything's gonna be all right.
But I wanted to point out with Jupiter, again, Jupiter creates honor and merit through your actions. Okay, so it brings good fortune through the awareness that you have that you can do something, right? And this last decan of Aquarius is really about leaving the past behind. It's very important to understand that what might bring you honor and merit is just saying, I've had enough of this. It's time for me to go. And that's not always true. If Jupiter was in the third decan of Leo, maybe you may get honor from staying and defending your position. But what we need right now is saying, I've learned from the past. I'm taking this wisdom with me, and I'm saying it's okay to let go. That's really what that will bring the best results right now.
Yeah, water under the bridge.
There you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, shall we move on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go to Mercury.
Yeah, it's a big day.
Turning direct in Libra on October 18th. So Mercury is at 10 degrees of Libra. Any thoughts, Tatiana?
Well, now we can start signing the contracts.
There you go. Right.
Okay.
All this time we're revaluing, revisiting, reevaluating, now because there's that huge help from Jupiter. Mm-hmm. And Jupiter also helps with like contracts, associations, like, it's a good time to now kind of put it in written agreements. Now this is kind of the time, like all those agreements that we're going back and forth, the bantering, the my truth, your truth, all of that stuff, the Pluto vomit. And once the Pluto vomit is kind of like, then we can, we can start, placing in actual concrete writing, the agreements, the new agreements, the new paradigm, where we left everything under the bridge and now we're being called to honor the new agreements. And this is the time to do it. Once Mercury goes direct, this is when we can actually actualize things. Everything that was here in the mental world and the idea, the realm of thought, now can become in the realm of speech and the realm of written, and then eventually the realm of concretization. You know, so this is the time.
Yeah, and Mercury is emerging from the beams on the same day. So it's becoming visible. Whatever we had been negotiating behind the scenes, now we will be able to see it finally move forward in our lives. So not only are we signing that contract, there is, you know, communications coming to us that are important that we should pay attention to on this day. And one final point I wanted to make about Libra is this is an idealistic sign. This is dealing with the world of perfect platonic form rather than like Virgo's type of perfection, which is dealing with physical things. And it can be a lot harder to come to an agreement on an idea rather than on a physical application of that idea. So keep that in mind, that when you're negotiating this contract, when you're signing this contract, you are signing for an intellectual idea rather than just a physical thing. Does that make sense? And when you keep that in mind, it's easier to say, well, I'm going to have to make adjustments in my expectations rather than even just the terms themselves. That has to come from a rational perspective, not just the physical, you know, nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah. And too, Mercury is in the sign of Libra, which is being hosted by Venus, who's no longer in Scorpio. So she's a bit happier there. And
Yeah.
she's hosted by Jupiter, who is no longer retrograde. So they're all a little bit happier.
Yeah, this is the end. This is the end of the more difficult stretch in the beginning of October. I think this is like the okay, catch your breath again before the Sun Saturn square at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So you can go up, get to the surface, go back down.
That's right. There you go.
All right, let's go to our full moon in Aries. So we have the moon at 27 degrees of Aries, and we have the sun at 27 degrees of Libra. So any thoughts?
Yeah, the fruition of what the seed that we planted on, what was it, October the 6th. So whatever you started around that period of time, this is where you might, you know, see the fruit of that. And again, it really piggybacks off of Jupiter turning direct, Mercury turning direct, Mercury emerging from the beams. This decan of Aries is about winning over a hostile crowd to your side through charisma and humor. So there may be, to be able to get the final signature on the deal, you may have to like use your enthusiasm, use your grace to be able to say, this is really why this is a great idea for all of us. You know, there might be some impassioned communication where you are maybe making that final argument for why to sign on the dotted line. And you know, with this, we're seeing also, you know, Mars making a square to Pluto and the moon T-squaring that Pluto that's been a part of our story. So again, there's still some challenging negotiations going on there, but I think the key is utilizing your charisma in a positive way rather than a manipulative way.
And because you know, the moon, the host of like this moon is Mars. There can be again issues of anger coming up, you know, that square to Pluto, like bursts of anger, emotions that are like repressed. So if we're not if we have not slowly released the pressure over the first half, then the whole buildup could just blow up here. Yeah. So the invitation is really to kind of do those little pss, 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 instead of like pressure the pot's going to explode, it's going to explode. And here, if we have not released that slowly, it will blow up. And
Yeah.
that's where the shit hits the fan. There's anger, there's resentment. Like, where did this come from? People like lashing out on others with a lot of anger. The moon in Aries can also have that, you know, angry streak and emotions of being like fast, not thinking, just like lashing out, you know, and without like pausing. So this is a good time if we're like too anxious to get your little pillow and punch the pillow before you punch the person, or right. This is a
Well, you might
time.
be tired by this time, right? I
Oh,
mean,
you might be tired. And
we've gone through so much by this period that
yeah,
all of that grace that you've built up over time, or all of that patient, you know, charismatic discipline to create a win-win situation, you may be finally like, screw it. Like, I'm tired of being nice. I
yeah,
want this, you know, so just be
that's,
careful of that impulse, because when we get tired, we lose some of that grace, right?
and we lose patience. And we know
Right.
with Aries there might be that, again, this like impatient feeling.
Hmm.
So we might lose patience. So it's a good time to remind yourself, take the deep breath, count to 4, hold, count to 4, release. Do that a few times, and guess what? Pressure gets released. Or punch the pillow. You know, do not throw the cat. You
Well,
know.
we still have Mars in Libra, right? You could have a pillow
Yeah,
fight. Maybe you could fight
you
with
could have a
pillows.
pillow. Exactly. And
There you go.
have a joyful pillow fight.
Right,
And
because then
it's
there's the stakes aren't that high, right?
exactly, it's like pillow fight. And you know what? This could even be turned into something not so I mean, not so actually
Oh,
dangerous.
okay. I thought you were going a different direction with that. I thought it
Oh,
could turn into some sexy times potentially.
oh, that's true. But Venus is out of Scorpio.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
She's
Yeah,
now exploring the world, you know.
sure.
Oh my goodness. Anyway.
So if this is the outcome kind of our new moon in Virgo that we had. You
Mm.
said on October 6th or September 6th, Spencer.
No, of the new moon in Libra in the 13
Oh,
degrees of
okay, new
Libra.
moon in
Right.
Libra.
October
Oh, okay.
6th. Yeah.
Okay.
So
But it also
There you go.
is of the new moon in Virgo, no? Is that not what we had?
Mm-mm. No, we had a new moon in Virgo early September and a full moon in Virgo.
We did. Oh, this is
Pisces.
a whole month later.
Yeah, that's all right. This is a lot of astrology.
yeah, blah,
No
blah, blah.
worries. Yeah.
Okay, scratch that. So, anything else to add for our full moon in Aries?
You know, do you have a slide with the Mars Pluto thing, or is that part of this here?
Let me see if I have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because this is really going to be part of the full moon story. This is a tough aspect. There's no beating around the bush here. Like, this is the most difficult, I think, of the 3 squares that we have with Mercury, Mars, and now, or sorry, Mercury, the Sun, and now Mars. This is the attempt, the desire to be ruthless to get what you want has potential here. Just in the collective, like, I went back and did some research the last time that these 2 planets squared off near these degrees, which was around November 4th, 2019. So a couple things in the collective. In America, Trump's tax returns had to be turned over to some sort of governing body in New York. So there was that kind of fight that was happening. In my own house, when we talk about Pluto as the plunger planet, the entire drain of our house backed up, and like there were tree roots in the drain that completely backed up our basement, and we had like shit everywhere in the basement, right?
We
And
actually had that too.
yeah, at the same time.
Not at the same time, but yeah.
Yeah, so that was, we were dealing with a situation that had been happening underneath the surface for a long time that finally erupted like a volcano. And we also had to clean out the attic. There was some attic issues going on. And I was also going through some conflicts at my job that I remember, because I always write in my journal what I'm going through and the aspects on the side. I really recommend that for beginning astrologers.
I do that too.
Right? It's a great way to learn. And I had written that I had some sort of conflict in a class that I was teaching, but I wrote that I think I passed the test because I was able to keep my cool when someone was really challenging me and trying to arouse my anger, you know. And I think that may be something that we see here too, just a situation that really might be triggering And are we going to pass the test? Are we going to be able to find a safe inner equilibrium so that, again, all these aspects are temporary. So if you can weather a day or two storm, you will feel relief afterwards. I think that's the key is in that moment, you have to make a choice so that you don't create an issue that's bigger than that moment, right? Because sometimes we lash out in anger. That creates problems that we have to clean up for much longer than if we just actually kept our composure in that moment.
And with Pluto too, like Pluto is the planet of metamorphosis, of completely flipping something on its head. So on a positive side of this, the experience itself might not be so pleasant, but the outcome could be from it. It could be, similar to like a bully turning into a justice fighter, or, bully going to anger management or something. Like just the complete opposite of what it started out as, and using that kind of Mars aggression for a more positive outcome.
Totally.
Tatiana, anything?
Let's keep on rolling.
All right, let's do
Scorpio
it.
season.
We're at 1 hour 20, so maybe, yeah.
1 hour 40.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. We have 1, 2, 3, 3 more slides. We're getting there. Sun enters Scorpio.
That's a big shift of energy all in itself, because, through the whole Libra, we've been dealing with this issues of balance, relationship, negotiation. And when the sun enters Scorpio, it's we shine light into, again, more of the deeper themes that have been kind of getting explored. Again, Scorpio, it's again, all the shadow side of ourselves, our ego, and the willingness also to shine light. The sun shines light on those parts of ourselves. So yeah, different is like the energy is going to shift, like definitely.
I think all the niceties of Libra go out the window. I think it's like, you don't have any more of that, like, oh, I'm going to have a smile on my face. It's like, let's get down to brass tacks. Here's the reality of the situation. You're going to have to deal with decay during this period of time. Like, I think Scorpio, one way I think of Scorpio is in terms of Mars. Mars severs and separates things. And in Aries, you're severing and separating to be able to infuse into a body. You're separating from the collective to infuse into an individual consciousness. In Scorpio, it's the opposite. You're severing consciousness from the body to return to the collective. And we're returning the form to the earth, right? So this especially first decan, you see the 5 of Cups card associated with this, with like a figure who is mourning a loss, 3 spilled cups with 2 in the background. And this really is about saying, okay, some forms have passed away, but we still have to shift to gratitude, to not get fixated on the mourning. It is important to mourn our losses. After these intense contract negotiations, you're probably going to be mourning something that you had to give up to come to an agreement. And the first few days of this may feel pretty heavy because the sun's going to be applying to a square to Saturn. You're going to feel like limited on some level because of that negotiation. But the key is to find gratitude for what remains and to acknowledge the loss. So don't ignore it, but don't get fixated into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And unfortunately, with all these Pluto aspects, there might also be actual literal death, unfortunately. So it could be psychological death, or it could be literal deaths. And this is not to just like be a downer, but now that we're talking about the Scorpio energy, is again understanding that everything is a cycle. And the more we can detach, with grace, the less painful and suffering there will be. And with Pluto, like you say, squaring the sun, like, in the first like decan, that could feel that we're like losing also almost like our own authority, you know. It's like somebody else is putting onto me a weight. So it could, with the energy I'm getting, is this like weight, and that I have to just accept it somehow. But it's
So
only to
sorry,
yeah,
just I think was it Saturn squaring in the
yeah,
first decan?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, in the few days to
Because we'll
come.
feel it when the sun moves. You
Right.
know, it's going to get more intense as we go towards the end of the month. But right when that moves, you're going to start seeing those themes rise up, right?
And you could feel that your sense of self is no longer like shining in that like nice, happy, fluffy energy. It's your sense of self is goes into this, you know,
Right.
almost like crystallization, and it feels weighted. The energy I'm getting is this kind of like weight. So yeah, to write that out with grace is just, you know, hang on to the hope.
Right.
You know, that flag that we were waving before, keep hanging on to that no matter what.
And that last week is going to feel slightly disorientating because when the sun moves into Scorpio, it moves into what's called an aversion with its host Mars. So it's not able to receive the types of resources that it needs to be able to carry out its mission. Now that's going to change when Mars moves into Scorpio, but we'll have a week where we just feel kind of like out of sorts a little bit, I think, between the 23rd and the 30th or so.
And Mars will still be kind of hanging out with Pluto.
Yeah, Mars will be hanging out with Pluto. Venus is squaring Neptune. So this is kind of like a disorientating week, I think, where we're just kind of like trying to figure it out, like trying to
You know,
survive.
I get this image of, you know, like a battlefield, and there's all these dead bodies on the
Mm,
ground, and people are just is the warrior is like with its armor, and it's kind of wounded, and it's kind of like dragging its feet and feeling like, do we need to keep fighting this war? Like
yeah,
there's that's the image that came, this kind of battlefield, dead people, wounded soldiers dragging their
totally.
feet. That's that energy. So don't
Yeah.
take it literal, but it's that kind of can I deal with another?
Well, Tatiana, you have really anticipated another decanic story between Venus and Neptune at this point. Like, so your intuition is right on here. When Venus actually makes the square with Neptune, it's going to be in the third decan of Sagittarius, which is associated with the third, with the 10 of Wands, where a figure is carrying a heavy, heavy load. And it's the last decan before the winter solstice. So it's like we're just trying to get towards the end. And Neptune being in the third decan of Pisces is this like crusade energy where it's saying, oh, we're willing to sacrifice everything for the dream. So it's like we're carrying this heavy burden. Like you were saying, we've had these losses, we've fought these battles, and it's like, how do we just get over to the next phase of life, right? So be gentle with yourself. Try and give yourself some time to rest during this period of time, because whenever the sun hits Saturn too, like this, feelings of inhibited vitality come up, where we're not really, we may feel a lack of energy. We may feel a little bit of a depression or some grief that comes up. So yeah, give yourself some space around that period of
Yeah,
time.
kind of just the desire to shirk one's responsibilities with Venus,
Yeah.
Neptune, just kind of wanting to enjoy the pleasant things of life, and Neptune kind of wanting to get a little bit of an escape from the everyday grind.
So in this respect, like I would say, beware of trying to go to escapism, like alcohol or drugs or anything, just because you can't bear the weight. Because that would be the typical go-to. Is like, I can't do this, I'm just gonna drown it in,
Totally.
I'm just gonna get drunk. So word of caution, because with Neptune and Venus there, there can be so much. And again, with relationships, it can get confusing. We might not even have any more footing regarding what even those agreements that we're making, and it might be confusing or depressing. And then again with Neptune, or we might just gonna go like in a shopping spree, like we have more money or whatever, and we just go and throat, and it's like, oh my God, what did I do? Like it could get confusing. So to avoid that, the best way, again, with Neptune Venus, always the best way is like dance it out, move,
Sure.
play some music that you're happy, like put some inspirational music and just
Watch a movie.
watch a movie. If you want to do some escapism, do some kind of inspirational escapism. Don't go and watch, I don't know, Requiem for a Dream. No, not the movie.
No, that's
don't watch that. Watch
I've seen that movie once, and that was enough.
Exactly. So go, if you need to get some hope, watch some like inspirational, beautiful movie, or like, some comedy, something that makes you dream. Sure. Something that makes you dream and connect to beauty, and hope. Remember that what we need to carry now is hope no matter what. So these are solutions to navigate these energies in the best way possible, because yes, it could get heavy, it could get weird, it could be tired, it could get
Yeah, and another thing with Scorpio that came up in Decanic research is desire is something that comes up with, especially with it being a Mars ruled sign. Like, we may have an awareness of like things that we hunger for that aren't able to be satisfied, right? So like Austin Coppock in his book 36 Faces calls the first decan of Scorpio a jawbone, because we're hungry for things. And there's an ancient document called the 36 Heirs of the Zodiac that assigns the spirit, the nymphi, to this decan, which are like, they are objects of desire in Greek mythology that are, creating lust, creating hunger, creating all of these things. So it ties in really well with what you're saying, Tatiana, about like, how do we pacify ourselves when we're feeling heavy emotions, and how do we do it in a way that's healthy rather than a way that's destructive, right?
Virgo tips.
Right, exactly. Take care of yourself, eat healthy, get sleep. You're always going to feel worse if you don't sleep or you eat a bunch of garbage. You may feel good in the moment, but you'll feel 100 times worse the next day,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, we have one more. So that was October 26th, the Venus square Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on to October 30th. So we have the actual Sun square Saturn, which we discussed a little bit on the previous slide. And then we have Mars finally entering Scorpio. So Sun, Saturn, and then over here is Mars. So thoughts, anyone?
I mean, we've got two planets in fixed, three planets now, right? In fixed signs, where this energy is, we're losing some flexibility, right? We're losing that maybe ability to make adjustments where, potentially people have dug their heels into their position. Like we've gotten the contract and now we have to live with it, and there's not as much movement around it, and that can lead to some frustration. So I think that you may feel that with the Sun, the awareness of your limitations. And Mars moving into Scorpio brings it into a whole sign square with Saturn, which talks about limited movement. There may be a return of you want to move forward with something, you desire it deeply, but it's running into some maybe collective limitation, like some kind of thing where we have to delay gratification for the good of the whole and the good of the collective. Right? Tatiana did an eye roll with that, because it's like we've been doing that for 2 years now, right? Like this grinding, it feels like one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake type of experience, right? And, Mars does improve its condition. It's in its nocturnal home in Scorpio here, but that's for better or for worse sometimes. It's more consistently Mars, but Mars is more ruthless here too. Instead of like smiling and then stab you in the back, this is like, I'm going to crush and destroy you, whether it takes a week or a lifetime, so be careful about those feelings of like, I have to have this at any cost, right?
I'm going to be using those dragons.
It makes me think of Javert in the Les Miserables, like it's this obsession. This Mars in Scorpio can really be obsessed with getting what it wants to get. So
That's right.
that's like the shadow side, is to go into obsessions and I just won't stop. And so it's, and then to what extent, I mean, the positive side of this is like, okay, we got this contrast, so let's get to it. But Saturn's saying like slow, get to it, but steady and slow,
Right.
so it's like so it's more like, I think, like concerted effort over time. If we kind of want to create something and build something sustainable, it's going to have this like slow paced, focused energy, and if we use it like that, then it could bring immense rewards later, if it's depending what we
and I
focus.
think also, Tatiana, in the collective, since Mars is in what's called the overcoming position, so it's earlier in the zodiac here, it's asserting its influence more powerfully onto Saturn. I think in the collective, we could see probably some anger and frustration erupting because of people's perceived limitations. I mean, we're going to be getting into the colder months of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, which could lead to some challenges with the continued, pandemic experience. I don't know, maybe some more limitations in regards to that, because we have things like Delta that are still creating problems, and maybe frustrations from those experiences. We've been asked to delay gratification for a long time, and people, I think, are getting tired. People are getting exhausted, and some of those frustrations may start bubbling over with this aspect, because we've just come to the end of our rope on some level.
Yeah,
But
people
I
who agree with the restrictions, people who
right.
don't agree, everyone's getting tired. Yeah.
Yeah, like exactly whatever side of the fence that you fall on, you're mad at somebody. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, and I think that it's going to be even more important to dive into those abilities to see a unified collective rather than an individual desire, one way or the other, because Saturn and Jupiter are so powerful in these positions.
Mhm.
They're really, that's the long term that's asking us, look, we have to have some sort of shared agreement for this society to continue to function as a society instead of just as an anarchist, type of experience. And that's going to require us to really use that maturity. That's what Saturn asks for, maturity. What is the mature thing? It's not the most fun thing. It's not the most gratifying thing in the moment, but it is that which is going to lead to results over time. It's working with the quality of time rather than the quality of like passion, like Tatiana was saying, that because there's passion that's going to bubble up around this period of time, and we're going to have to be detached from that on some level.
Yeah.
On an individual level, it might be a good day to catch up on all the work that we didn't do during the Venus-Neptune square. We'll have that kind of intense focus on whatever the task is.
But this too shall pass. I think this is the thing to keep in mind. The wheel keeps on spinning, and even though we're going through a difficult period of time here, and even though it feels like the goalpost keeps moving, right? Where it's like, oh, well, now it'll be okay. Now it'll be okay. There will be a time where we will have made the proper adjustments to be able to deal with whatever the reality is moving forward. Not the normal, the reality, right? I don't like that word normal. I think that's how do we deal with what challenges we're presented with. And as human beings, one of the greatest things about being human, and the reason the species has been able to survive for so long, is that we are adaptable. We are flexible. We learn to make certain tools. We learn to move to different places if there's resources there that we need to survive. So it's about being flexible. That's what's helped us to survive for so long. And we will do it again, or we won't survive. Like, that's really, I think, the key is it's time to make a big adjustments for the survival of the species.
And even on difficult days like this, there are ways of kind of taking a step back and making your own world a little bit smaller for the time being, and just focusing on the here and now, and what do I need? What does my mind, my spirit, my body need in this moment, and kind of figure that out first and meet your own needs, and then go out into the world again.
Yeah, I think like to close this whole thing, like piggybacking on what Dulcie is saying, yeah, bringing back your awareness, not to the big picture of things where it can get really heavy, but to how you direct your thoughts. What am I thinking? Because my thoughts can create my reality. What I give energy to and give thought to tends to manifest and crystallize in reality. So go back to that. What am I thinking? Am I still going to gloomy thoughts, sad thoughts, depressive thoughts, scared thoughts, or can I keep a sense of hope, perseverance, heart, love, no matter what? If we can keep there, well, that's more likely what we're going to be producing as a consensus world. So this is always my invitation, and people who have followed this channel and have followed my other channels, that's the invitation always. And yeah, to move through difficult, challenging reality, then let's create a reality that comes from a different place within. That's my invitation. So that's my closing thought on this.
Well, and Saturn won't be in Aquarius forever either. So, we got a little bit longer, but it'll pass. And then there'll be a different challenge, and it'll be something else that we'll have to adjust to. And you said it, hope is important. I think that was one of the lessons of the last full moon that we experienced in Pisces, is when Pandora's box is unleashing all of these fears and terrors onto the world. The last thing that remained in the box was hope. And that's what helps keep us moving forward, right? Even if we have a knowledge of our own mortality, to not get lost in that hopelessness, we have to be able to I don't know, think of a brighter future, right? And to be able to put some energy into that. While I will make a slight caveat on what you're saying about creating your own reality, I would say we're co-creating. I'd say that there are certain circumstances we're presented with that are out of our control. Because if we think that we're completely in control of everything, that can lead to a little bit of like a victim guilt, illusion as well. So yeah, we have to think about how are we adjusting to circumstances, and then through our reaction to that, we can choose a reaction that will lead to different outcomes moving forward, right?
Absolutely,
So
yes.
it's the balance. We're back to the balance and the temperance of both of those things. So I love it.
All right.
We're on the 2-hour mark.
We sure are. And on that note, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Yeah.
That was powerful.
Definitely. Yeah. We went a little bit over what we had planned.
No, and we went deep, right? But it's like deep thoughts.
Yeah, this is fun. Thank you for inviting me on to.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Spencer. And definitely people check out his webinars. I'll add all of the links to that in the notes, as well as the coupon code that you can use to get 20% off of the Decans of Libra course, or the bundle, the Decans of Fall courses.
Perfect.
Spencer, did you want to add anything about what you have coming up, or where people can find you?
Yeah, those Decan webinars are something I'm putting a lot of energy into. And I have a YouTube channel too, Spencer Michaud Astrology, where I do live streams for the new and the full moon, and a monthly as well. And I had the two of you on there for the new moon in Virgo not too long ago, and did a great job. So tune into that, and you can follow me on socials, Instagram and Twitter at Spencer Michaud. Yeah, and I just really am happy that you all are doing this work that you're doing, and enjoying that. Being able to contribute.
Yeah, it's been awesome collaborating. Go ahead, Tatiana.
Yeah, no, so thank you again, Spencer, so much for coming on the show and just getting this very detailed and flushed out information. And I hope everybody gets some value out of this, and please feel free to share, like, subscribe. That always helps our channels to grow, both like Spencer's channels, our channel, and check out the links below for readings as well. I also do evolutionary astrology and archetypal astrology readings, and so does Spencer. Does amazing readings. Like, he did a fixed star reading for me that is phenomenal. So just please feel free to share and spread the information. I feel that this is a really powerful, what astrology brings. So and especially in this time that we need so much support, getting that support, those readings, those things helps you navigate things. So yeah, this is like the invitation to do that. So in this note, do we want to close it and wrap it up?
Yeah, I'll add all of your contact information as well into the notes. And just to say, you can find Astrology Victoria on Facebook, Instagram, and Meetup. We are Astrology Victoria BC. But if you're not from Victoria, please feel free to join us, because since the pandemic, we have kind of opened our doors and everyone is welcome. We host
To the whole universe.
yeah, any planet, whatever. We host astro chats, just kind of casual discussions online about the astrology of the moment. Or we have more formal talks by professional astrologers, which Spencer gave a talk for us as well. So feel free to join us. And yeah, we'll see you next time. All right. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, friends.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.